Hello, music fans. You're watching Death by Unicorn, and if you like metal, rock, and prog music, you've come to the right place. This is What's New 2024. I'm going to talk about 7 new albums that came out over the last week, and I'll talk about them in my order of preference, starting with Neal Morse and the Resonance, and their album No Hill for a Climber came out on November 9th, or November 8th. All of these albums came out on November 8th, except for one came out on the 9th. This is the debut album by this American project. It's symphonic progressive rock. And I'm going to put this one in my excellent tier. While it is the debut album by Neal Morse and the Resonance Band, Neal Morse himself is a prolific industry veteran. He's released many solo albums, as well as many albums with Spock's Beard, Transatlantic, and the Neal Morse Band. And on Spotify, you can actually find this album just under the Neal Morse name as well. So it looks like just a continuation of his solo catalog. Most of the albums Neal Morse is involved in are excellent, so I was definitely looking forward to hearing this one. And I actually think this is even better than the last two Joseph albums he did. And I already thought those were excellent. But this one starts with a 21-minute long prog epic, Eternity in Your Eyes. And then it also ends with an almost 29-minute prog epic, No Hill for a Climber. And it has 3 shorter songs in the middle. It's an interesting format. Every song is excellent. I'm not as into the lyrical content on Neal Morse albums because he does go a bit too far into the Christian themes for my liking, but the music is just undeniably excellent, so I give him a pass on the lyrics not being to my taste. Check it out if you're a fan of anything Neal Morse has done before. If you're a fan of Spock's Beard, Transatlantic, Neal Morse Band, you will love this album by Neal Morse and the Resonance, No Hill for a Climber. Next up is Klone and their album The Unseen. This is the 8th album by this French band. It's progressive metal with some alternative metal, post-metal, groove metal, and a little bit of just hard rock influence in there. It's not overly metal or overly heavy. I love their last album, Meanwhile, from 2023. And the singles I heard ahead of time from this one sounded quite similar to the sound of their last album, Meanwhile. Check this out if you're a fan of Tool, Deftones, The Ocean, Sigur Rós, and Cult of Luna. It sounds like a mix of those bands, but they just do clean vocals. There's no screaming. It's pretty accessible progressive metal music. It's very atmospheric progressive post-metal. It's got an early 2000s alternative metal and new metal guitar tone. And they also feature saxophone, so that brings an interesting sound you don't hear too often in this style of music. I think this one is excellent, just like their last one, so I'm putting it in my excellent tier. I don't think it breaks any new ground for them, but I also don't think they have to because they've just carved out a pretty nice and unique niche sound that is recognizably them. One criticism I have is that I think the final track, Spring, was just a little longer than it needed to be. That outro went on too long on the same kind of instrumental guitar riff, and the track could have likely stayed under 10 minutes instead of being over 12 minutes long. But other than that, I liked every track on the album. I still like the final track. I just feel like it could have been a little shorter at the end there. And if that sounds good to you, check out The Unseen by Klone. Next up, we're getting into my very good tier instead of my excellent tier. Now we're going to talk about The Pineapple Thief. And Last to Run is their EP by this British band. It's progressive rock with alternative rock influences. And they released an album earlier this year that's excellent, so I was hoping they'd continue their greatness with this. They delivered again. It's a very good collection of songs. I personally just wish they wrote a few more, and even if it took them some more time, just had it come out as a full album in 2025, that would have been better. I prefer full lengths generally to EPs. Some EPs I love, but this one is great. But I think if it was a full length album, there could have been some more opportunity for them to take a few more risks. I wish they took a few more risks because it all plays pretty safely within the bounds that you'd expect from the Pineapple Thief. But they do have a great sound and the songwriting's great. My favorite track after 2 listens is the opening track, All Because of Me. Next up in my very good tier is the Mommyheads with their album One-Eyed Band. This is the 16th album by this American band. It's indie rock with Baroque pop, progressive rock, alternative rock, art rock, kind of hard rock, just all sorts of different kinds of rock and pop and alternative indie and prog all mixed in. This is it continues the sound of their last album, Coney Island Kid, which is the only other album I've heard from them, which I think Coney Island Kid's maybe a bit stronger. I have that one in my more of my excellent tier. This reminds me, uh, just like Coney Island Kid from 2023, this new album reminds me of newer Thrice music in that more alternative indie folk pop rock, but with some progressive songwriting and artistic flair. Definitely in the vocal style and songwriting, it reminds me of newer Thrice. There's no hardcore influence though, so they don't have any of that. It's all clean vocals. The bass is interesting and busy on this album. It uses a lot of cool effects, like on the song Architect, for example, and Chicken Soup and Risk It All are both nice songs with 7 beats per bar, showing their interest in odd time signatures that we prog fans like. If that sounds good to you, definitely check out the Mommyheads and One-Eyed Band. Next up, I'm going to talk about a covers album that I don't usually talk about on this channel too often, but I'm putting this in my very good tier. It's one of the better, if it's up there in terms of one of the best covers albums I've ever heard. It's The Shape of Punk to Come, Obliterated. This is basically a reimagining of that album by Refused. Post-hardcore with hardcore punk, art rock, progressive rock, metalcore, alternative metal, all mixed into the stew. And this is Refuse's album, The Shape of Punk to Come, reimagined by 12 bands handpicked by Refuse themselves, including Cult of Luna, Igor, and more. And my favorite track is the one performed by Cult of Luna. I love most of what Cult of Luna does. That's probably the main reason I'm checking this out. I do like the original album by Refused as well. And if you like the original album by Refused, you should definitely listen to this. And also, if you're a big Cult of Luna fan, you have to check out their track at the very least. But I'd recommend just listening to the whole thing. Shape of Punk to Come, Obliterated. Definitely check it out. 2 more albums to go in this video. Second last one I'm going to mention is Tungsten with their album Grand Inferno. The 4th album by this Swedish band. It's power metal with heavy metal and symphonic metal influences. I'm also putting this in my very good tier. This is a band by ex-Hammerfall drummer Anders Johansson and his 2 sons. And I thought their last album, Bliss, from 2022 was very good. Very catchy hooks and fun music. I was hoping they'd take it to the next level on this one, and they definitely did. I was immediately surprised by the opening track, Anger, because it contained some harsh vocals. And if I recall correctly from their previous album, it was all clean vocals. That was a pleasant surprise. It brought a lot more intensity to the track than what I expected from this album and this band. Then the 3rd track, Lullaby, was also a surprise because it starts with female vocals, more of a dance beat. This album brings in a lot more variety than their last album. So it was more interesting in that way, but I think some of the catchy hooks from the last album are a bit stronger. All in all, they're both pretty equal albums from my perspective. They're both very good, especially if you like catchy power metal. And for this newer one, if you don't mind it pushing outside of the genre norms of power metal from time to time, then you should like this. Check out Tungsten and the Grand Inferno. And last on my list for this week is Make Them Suffer with their self-titled album, the 5th album by this Australian band. This is progressive metalcore. It's got some gent, deathcore, and alternative metal influences in there. And I don't know too much about Make Them Suffer, but before this I had heard some of their tracks. They seemed interesting, so I added it to my list to listen to. I heard the singles, Man of God, which was extremely heavy, all harsh vocals, and Oscillator, which was also extremely heavy but had a nice chorus with clean female vocals. And I was hoping the album would be more like the Oscillator track with those melodic moments, and I was happy to hear that it was. There's lots of female clean vocals on this album that are really catchy, well done, but then they also have a lot of those brutal, extreme, harsh vocals, distorted guitar riffs, occasionally bordering on gent and deathcore. If that sounds good to you, check out Make Them Suffer, their self-titled album. I'm putting it in my very good tier. So that's it for these 7 albums, 2 of them being excellent, 5 of them making my very good tier. What do you think of these albums? Let me know down in the comments which one's your favorite out of the ones I mentioned, or which ones have you heard, which ones do you like, which ones you don't like, and is there anything else that came out recently that you think I'd enjoy? And hit that subscribe button if you want to see the albums that I'm going to talk about next week, and I pretty much do this every week. Next week I'll be talking about Linkin Park, Thy Catafalque, As I Lay Dying, Chelsea Wolfe, and Poppy. Give my first impressions on their new albums that are all dropping on November 15th. So if you want to hear what I have to think about those, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned. Peace out.